Hello, everyone. Jason Hagholm here. Sorry for the little delay. Just got caught up running around doing some things. So sorry that I'm a little late getting here. But hey, you know what? Better late than never. And we're here, as always, to preview UFC 271. And we'll do a little Super Bowl chatter as obviously the Super Bowl, we're 24 hours away from the biggest football game of the NFL season with between the Cincinnati Bengals and the Los Angeles Rams. But obviously tonight is the night for UFC 271 taking place where the Middleweight Championship is on the line. Israel Adesanya will defend against Robert Whittaker in a rematch. You know what? This is a fight I think a lot of people are looking forward to, especially in the growth of what Robert Whittaker's been able to do, and really overall the growth that Israel Adesanya's made in his time as a UFC champion. Obviously, the lone loss he's had is up a division at light heavyweight when he fought last year against then champion Jan Blachowicz. So this is a fight I think what I'm interested to see is how much has the growth in Whittaker really going to affect the fight? And just, listening to him at the press conference, kind of soaking up this whole week where there isn't as much pressure. Like, yes, it is a title fight, but he seems to be, it's not on, his home country soil. He's not too worried about that. He's just kind of taking it in and enjoying each and every moment. There's no animosity between him and Israel Adesanya going into this fight, which is a bonus. And he can kind of just go out there and focus on what he's able to do. And that's be, one of the top middleweights out in the world right now. And look, since Robert Whittaker lost that fight to Israel Adesanya back in October of 2019 at UFC 243, he's gone on there, won 3 fights, all decisions, hard-fought decisions over guys that did push him. Darren Till pushed him at moments in that fight back in the summer of 2020, and then Jared Cannonier was a really tough, close fight, and Kelvin Gastelum was a fight that was tough, but I mean, Whittaker did find the way to kind of push on through and go away and get the unanimous decision. So he's been in there with some real tough guys. Hasn't had a finish in quite a while since he, had a head kick KO with punches back in April of 2017 against Jacare Souza. But, for Robert Whittaker, I think as well, him taking that time off and regrouping, healing up the body, being mentally prepared, and just recharging the batteries. It's made him just much more complete and more dangerous mixed martial artist. Now, granted, his opponent here in Israel Adesanya, this is a guy that's only lost one professional fight as a mixed martial artist, and that was the Jan Blachowicz fight last March at UFC 259. But Adesanya, he's really just showcasing what he can do. His striking, he can just pick you apart if you come through him. I mean, Robert Whittaker does know that, as their first fight at UFC 243 didn't even get into those championship rounds. So I don't think Whittaker wants to do that. I think Adesanya is expecting to go out there and have a great fight. If you bring the fight to him, he's just gonna, let those striking go and showcase why he's so difficult and tough to hit. I think as well, Adesanya is just on a different level right now as a middleweight here in the UFC, undefeated in this division, has, successful title defenses against Yoel Romero, a domination against Paulo Costa, and a fight he pretty much controlled against Marvin Vettori last June at UFC 263. So honestly, the way I look at it, I think that Adesanya, I picked him maybe a 4th round stoppage in the fight, but hearing Whittaker, I could see it going decision, though I still favor Israel Adesanya to come through and win, because this is a guy that wants to right now just make, records happen. He wants to have the most title defenses in a single year in the UFC. Maybe that's easier said than done. It's tough to do, especially with some of the talent that's in this middleweight division and just how dangerous a fight this can be with Robert Whittaker. But I think Whittaker makes it more of a fight. I think we definitely see championship rounds, but I just think Adesanya, his style of striking, his use of angles, and his ability overall on the improvements on the ground, maybe a little bit too much for Robert Whittaker. So I would still reign with the champion to retain his championship in Israel Adesanya. Then moving to the co-main event, Derrick Lewis taking on Tai Tuivasa. It's a very interesting fight at heavyweight. Obviously, Derrick Lewis coming off the win against Christakis back in December at the final show of 2021. But before that, in Houston, his hometown, where this show is taking place, the performance he probably wants to forget in the interim title fight against Ciryl Gane, where he really didn't get to showcase anything, was trying to use kicks to set up his striking and use kicks as a jab when, Lewis isn't really known for throwing those kicks. He's got those big, powerful right hands. And of course, the fight before the title fight last year was the unbelievable knockout against Curtis Razor Blades back in last February. So, I think as well, this being a co-main event fight and no title on the line, I think Derrick Lewis is kind of going to live in the moment a little bit more. I mean, it's not like he hasn't fought in Houston in the past, but the pressure of there being a title on the line may have affected him a little bit much, and I think he even admits that. But here, he's up against Tai Tuivasa, a guy who really has turned his career around, had lost 3 fights in a row in the UFC, Junior Dos Santos to Blagoy Ivanov, and of course, Sergey Spivak. And it looked like he was on the verge of, seeing the door and being let out of the UFC, but he turned things around with the wins over Stefan Struve, Harry Hunsucker, the Greg Hardy KO, which was just unbelievable, especially when it looked like Tuivasa got hurt, and then a second round TKO over against Augusto Sakai, who was a guy we thought may have been able to break on through to the other side and be a serious contender at heavyweight, but now it's Tai Tuivasa. So going from losing 3 straight to now winning 4 straight in the span of about 2 years is pretty impressive. And I really think that Tuivasa, he kind of, he's made some changes to himself mentally, buying into that. Everyone's, in love with him with the shoeies and whatever he does. But I think this fight doesn't exit the first round. These are 2 heavyweights that love to bang, throw those big bombs. When you look at Tuivasa, 13 of his 14 wins have come away by KO or TKO. And for Derrick Lewis, when you look at what Derrick Lewis has done in his 26 wins, 21 of them have come by KO or TKO. So the numbers, they don't lie. I think they pile up where these heavyweights, they just stand and trade in the pocket. And I think Lewis is going to, have one of his better performances that we've seen. I think he's cleared up and realized, some of the mistakes he made the last time out in Houston. Doesn't have as much pressure, no title on the line. I expect him to come out there and get a first-round KO, TKO over Tai Tuivasa. And as well, we don't know really what the status is. We know that the current champion, Francis Ngannou, having some surgery. He's going to be probably out 9 months. They're still working out the contract negotiation. Don't be surprised if Derrick Lewis finds himself, if they have an interim title fight at some point later this year with the inactivity that Ngannou is going to have due to an injury. Don't be surprised if Derrick Lewis puts himself in the mix once again to fight for a title. Now, who he fights up against, I don't know who it would be, because we kind of saw the cards laid out on the table the last time he fought Ciryl Gane, and I don't think we need to see that fight again. But Derrick Lewis, company man, UFC loves him. He loves the UFC, and he's getting up there too. And I think if he wants to really make a run at being a heavyweight champion, still the time is now, and it's still cards are out there for him to do it. And I think that Lewis starts that track again, as he put away a good prospect in Dawkins his last time out, Chris Dawkins his last time out, and I think he puts away Tai Tuivasa here early in the first round at UFC 271. Then we go to a fight that's definitely not getting talked about as much as I thought it would heading into the week, with Jared Cannonier taking on Dereck Brunson. Kind of surprised they weren't even at the press conference ahead on Thursday, where we just had Ottasanya, Whittaker, and Lewis Tuivasa. But I thought, you know what? This is a card where this is a fight on the card in a division that's starting to garner some steam and momentum. Obviously, we saw what Sean Strickland did last weekend up against Jack Hermansson. And look, Cannonier, a guy that, he's been through the ringer in the UFC and found his home here at middleweight. Started out at heavyweight, went to light heavyweight. He's just got the perfect frame, perfect structure to be a middleweight. And look what he's done at middleweight inside the UFC. Dave wins over David Branch and Anderson Silva, victory, via causing a knee injury with leg kicks, finishing Jack Hermansson, and then beating Kelvin Gastelum pretty decisively in his last fight back in August. And the only loss is to Robert Whittaker, who is fighting for the title. So if Whittaker does lose, it opens a whole new laneway for other contenders to fight Israel Adesanya. And I think Cannonier can definitely be one of them. I mean, his wrestling, his grappling, and what he can do on the ground is very impressive for what he brings to the table as a mixed martial artist. But, spending that time at the MMA lab there in Arizona, he's just got the perfect amount of power, and he can put a lot of guys away. And that's what he's done, especially making the transition here, as I said, to 185. He's a perfect 185er. He could get down to the weight, made championship level weight here. But he's taking on Dereck Brunson, and this is a guy that you as well, since he's made the transition to Sanford MMA out in Florida, a totally new fighter. This is a guy that, had kind of risen up, came over in the Strikeforce organization and gotten his, opportunities before and never really could cash in. He had the Jacare Souza fight, didn't go his way, fought Israel Adesanya at MSG at UFC 230 in 2018. That one finished in the first round, and you thought, maybe, this guy's just going to be kind of a gatekeeper from time to time. But look at what Dereck Brunson has been able to do since joining Sanford MMA. A unanimous decision against Elias Theodorou, the Ian Heinisch decision, finishing Edmund Shabazian when the hype train was all on Edmund Shabazian. And if you look at the build to that fight night main event, it was all about Edmund Shabazian, trained with Ronda Rousey, this young protege. Like Dereck Brunson, he was definitely put on the back burner. He starts the derailing of the hype train of Kevin Holland, and then finishing Darren Till in a fight where, Till had his moments and looked okay. But honestly, it's Brunson's wrestling, his grappling. He just wears on you, he grinds on you, and he sucks the will out of his opponents. And unfortunately, Darren Till was able to get rear naked choked, and Kevin Holland really didn't get any offense in. He finished Edmund Shabazian. So I think what we know is Brunson's a bit of a slow starter, but can you afford to be a slow starter against someone like Jared Cannonier, who comes in, hits like a ton of bricks, and can end a fight early? I mean, as we said, this is a guy that's just hits so hard, very effective. And when he gets those finishes up against, obviously Anderson, Dave Branch was a second round finish. Jack Hermansson was an early second round finish. And Anderson Silva was a injury finish late in the first round. I think if Brunson can survive the early storm that Cannonier brings to him, I think Brunson has a chance. Brunson's proven to be a guy that can really push the pace, especially, late in the second round, definitely in the third rounds. But I would take Jared Cannonier. I think Cannonier, this is his time. Cannonier is proving, like, my only loss here at middleweights against a guy that was a champion, is now fighting for the championship on this card. I think he knows he needs to go out there and especially win with a statement win after Sean Strickland had a big win and shut down Jack Hermansson, but it didn't have the oohs and ahs that I think a lot of people thought would have. So I think if Cannonier gets a win and a finish, especially, first or second round, I would expect Cannonier to maybe be fighting Israel Adesanya at some point later in 2022. But it's a very interesting fight. I'm kind of sad that it kind of got downplayed a little bit. This is a very pivotal fight in a division where, it's starting to find that jockeying for position and finding its momentum and groove that we're so used to seeing this division have. Fight that now gets bumped up to the pay-per-view portion, Alexander Hernandez versus Renato Moicano. Obviously, this is now up here. We lost the fight with, not that it would have been a pay-per-view fight, but we lost Alex Perez, Matt Schnell. That came on because Perez missed weight. Schnell decided he didn't want to fight. So that fight gets scrapped. And now we see Alex Hernandez move up here to take on Renato Moicano. And Perez, Hernandez, was a guy that, kind of said, hey, I feel like I deserve to be in a pay-per-view opportunity. An opportunity came, and well, now they put him here. So you kind of got to back that up. And, since the Cerrone fight, where we had really all the hype built on Alex Hernandez, this guy's been hot and cold. He came back with the Francisco Trinaldo decision win, then a loss to Drew Dober, finished that fight, finishes Chris Grutzmacher, decision loss to Diego Moises, and then, first round finish over Mike Breeden. And I like Mike Breeden. Mike Breeden's a good fighter, but has shown flashes of him really not being that UFC level caliber guy. Like, he's tough, durable. We all remember what he did on the Contender Series to Anthony Romero, went back to FAC and, then comes back here to the UFC, gets dusted up by Hernandez. So Hernandez is just been very inconsistent. And if that trend tends to continue here, you would expect him to lose to a guy here in Moicano, who was one of the better featherweights at his time when he was fighting at 145. And you just look at the guys that he's lost to in the UFC, like Brian Ortega fought for a title recently. Jose Aldo, arguably one of the greatest featherweights of all time, and still doing the damn thing down at bantamweight. And as well, we all remember the destruction that the Korean Zombie had against him, and pretty much kind of forced Moicano to go up to 155. And 155 so far, 2-1, and their lone loss was to Rafael Fiziev, and that's nothing to sneeze about. So he's lost to the guys he's lost to in the UFC are really, cream of the crop, title guys that have fought for titles or on the verge for fighting for titles in both 145 and 155. And as well, look, at 145, he did have a big decision win over Calvin Kattar, so that does as well say a lot. I think Moicano, I think he's just a little bit too much more complete rounded guy. If the fight hits the ground, I expect Moicano to grab a limb, get a submission, whether it's a rear naked choke, arm bar, heel hook, leg lock, whatever it may be. That's where it's going to go. Moicano, though, you don't want to get into the firefight. You're a guy that in your 15 wins, 0 have come by way of a KO or TKO. You're a very tactical fighter, and your world is the ground game. And I think that's where Moicano wants to take the fight. And I think Hernandez knows that and has to do everything in his power to stuff those takedowns. But I think Moicano, he's been in there with 2 tough guys. He's just a little bit too experienced. And I think Moicano takes advantage of this. And, another, tough guy from Brazil, obviously training at American Top Team too. That's a big spot for, world-class mixed martial artists. The pay-per-view kicks off with Nasarat Hackforass taking on Bobby Green. First of all, shout out to Bobby Green. This guy, he's just been doing it for so long at such a high level. All around mixed martial arts. He's been in the UFC since 2013, but we all remember him from Strikeforce and even that Affliction days back on the Affliction 2, where he lost that wild, insane fight to Joe Lozon's brother. Dan was rear naked choked in there. But this is a guy right now in green who's, really turning on and finding his form as of late. He looked the best we've seen him probably in the UFC against Al Iaquinta with that, first round finish, like 2 minutes and 25 seconds into the fight. And, I think as well, one of the guys that's really taken advantage of the pandemic era of mixed martial arts is Bobby Green. He's gotten so much better, just being able to be a little bit more active than, per se you normally would be. At one point in 2020, he had a 3-fight win streak, decision wins over Clay Guida, Lando Venata, and Alan Patrick. And then lost to Diego Moises by a decision. You lose to Fiziev by decision. There's nothing to really, be mad about. He's looked good in each and every one of those performances where, Hackforass, though, is a very tough, durable guy. That Dan Hooker fight is such a weird one. Both guys were, obviously Hackforass was dealing with, a death in his immediate family. So that definitely played a factor into it. And making the trek around the world to get to the States for that fight. I mean, Dan Hooker, the same thing, even more so, and got the win. But, before that, 2 big decision wins over Alex Munoz and Rafa Garcia. I don't know, man. I like Hackforass. I think Hackforass is a really talented mixed martial artist, but I think maybe Bobby Green's going to find a way to get a win here. I think Bobby Green's right now, peaking at the right time. And he's a guy that just wants one more maybe big run in his mixed martial arts career. And I think the time could be now for him. So I lean Bobby Green finding a way to come away with the decision. I think Bobby Green's going to be able to absorb what Hackforass can bring to the table and find a way to grind out, either a 29-28 unanimous decision or a split decision victory. Then moving on to the prelims. How about this? Andrei Arlovski. You want to talk about an OG of mixed martial arts, a guy that's had 58 professional fights, former UFC heavyweight champion, and really the gatekeeper. If you want to become an elite level heavyweight in the UFC, you got to get through Andrei Arlovski. And Andre still likes to compete, still looks good, and he's one of those guys that is trimming down. He's not so much a bulky heavyweight, not that he ever really was, but 246 I think is the perfect kind of weight he wants to be right now. I mean, he is up there at just turning 43 years old, but you know what? He still can do what he needs to do to keep grinding out these decision victories and look good. His striking still looks crisp. His work on the ground is good, and he just puts it on you. And he's just tough to handle. And I think he's still going to be that for Jared Vanderaa here. Coming into this fight, Vanderaa got a contract out the Contender Series, but right now 1-2 in the UFC. The lone win was a decision victory over Justin Tafa, which, you get a win in the UFC, sure, that's great, but Tafa's also a guy that is, now gone on record being the first heavyweight to miss the heavyweight limit. So honestly, I think, Vanderaa is going to have to find a way to land the perfect combination to hit Arlovski on the chin to drop him. Because I think Arlovski, he just mixes his strikes up too well. There's nothing Vanderaa, I think, can do can really surprise you. He's not so much that spectacular of an athlete to look at. So I would honestly take a decision victory for Andre the Pitbull Arlovski to, keep going out there and doing the damn thing. That would be a 3-fight win streak for Arlovski. Maybe the first, 3-fight win streak he's had since his time outside of the UFC, then coming back into the UFC back between 2013 and 2015. Then moving down the card as well, women's flyweight, very interesting fight. Final fight here of Roxanne Modafferi, OG, a pioneer of women's mixed martial arts, having spent a lot of time in, hook and shoot, smack girl in Japan, Shudo, she was competing at women's mixed martial arts when no one really cared about women's mixed martial arts, except if you were, a guy on the Sheerdog forums or even following anything along those lines, and where she was competing and obviously had some success, fighting for a women's bantamweight championship in Strikeforce back in 2010, got an opportunity on The Ultimate Fighter, has fought in Invicta. I mean, done anything and everything to, get eyeballs on her and just become, one of the more interesting characters. And like I said, a pioneer. So it's going to be really sad to see Roxanne Modafferi go. Respect what she has done, and I thank her for everything she's done for not only women's MMA, but MMA as a whole, because she's one of the great, interesting characters. And, she said this is a retirement fight, so there's a lot of stuff she's been, wanting to do in a fight, but been reluctant on doing it. And she's just going to go all out here against Casey O'Neill, who comes into this fight 8-0, undefeated prospect. And you know what? She's looked really good in her time in the UFC. As I said, she's 8-0, 3 wins, all pretty much by way of finish. Finishing Shayna Dobson, Laura Porquillo, and Antonina Shevchenko. All those wins in the UFC all came last year. So she's been one of the fortunate ones that was very active fighting last year. And I mean, she does bring a lot to the table. She hits hard, especially for a girl in this weight class. 3 out of her 8 wins have come by KO, TKO, but she's not afraid to go and mix it up on the ground with 2 submission victories. And I think, you know what, she may have the youth being a benefactor on her side going forward in this fight. I think she's going to be the one trying to push the pace, and she doesn't want to have her blemished against, on Roxanne's going out. And you know what Casey feels right now, she's on the verge to getting in that contention of fighting for a flyweight title shot. She's already beat Valentina's sister, as we mentioned before, so she's gunning for it. There's still a lot of space in that weight class right now for an opportunity. I expect Casey O'Neill to go out there and get a finish, but and come through and get it done. But I think this is going to be a little bit more tricky of a fight than it looks on paper. I think Roxanne Modafferi is going to really bring it to the table. She's just going to, not leave any stone unturned. I think Casey O'Neill finds a way to still get a finish in this fight, but Roxanne Modafferi is going to make it tougher for her, and it's going to be the right test for O'Neill to try to earn that 9th straight victory as a professional mixed martial artist. Kyler Phillips and Marcelo Hojo. This one's unfortunately was supposed to be on the pay-per-view, but then they bumped this one here down. And Marcelo Rojo, a guy that's coming in, still looking for that first win in the UFC. He's had a lot of opponents fall out. Was supposed to fight Kevin Kroom, then Jonathan Martinez. Martinez pulled out, and then Daniel Santos. So all those fights that fell through, none of them were his fault. And we all remember how well and successful Marcelo Rojo was in this time in Combate Americas, or now Combate Global. He was one of the more, well-known, talented guys. And obviously that success has shined on because he's coming into the UFC here for his second fight. It was a tough back and forth, awesome fight against Charles Jourdain last March, where he got finished with 30 seconds or so left in the fight. So we know about Marcelo Rojo. This is a guy that can love to stand in those, make those firefights happen. 8 of his victories, of his 16 victories, have come by way KO, TKO. 6 as well come by way of what he can do on the ground via submission. But I think Kyler Phillips is a different animal. The Matrix, 9-2 as a professional. Another guy out of the MMA lab. Lost to Julian Paiva his last time out. It was a tricky fight for him, but he's got a very solid victory over Song Yadong last March at UFC 259. So I think, I'm really high on Kyler Phillips. I think he mixes up his strikes very well. I think he's going to push the pace, try to connect on a big shot that's probably going to land when Rojo's not expecting it. And if it goes to the fight, I do favor Kyler Phillips as well. Like, sure, he may have only 1 submission victory to his credit, but I think obviously at the MMA lab, they keep working on what you can do on the ground. So I'd expect Kyler Phillips, though, to find a way to stuff some takedowns, keep it on the feet, and find a way to get a, maybe late first, early second round finish over Marcelo Rojo. But that is a fight that could be really, really competitive and a fun fight to close out, or be one of the feature prelims on the main prelim card. Light heavyweights, then Carlos Ullberg takes on Fabio Charon. It's been a while since we've seen Carlos Ullberg since the insane Kennedy Nchukwu fight last March at UFC 259. Where, it was Ullberg really showcasing that slick kickboxing that we're used to seeing from those city kickboxing guys. But then, Ullberg couldn't put Nchukwu away, and Nchukwu just came forward and hurt and dropped Ullberg and got a very impressive victory that's really set Nchukwu kind of on the trajectory upward that he is on right now. And so we haven't seen Ullberg since then. So we're going to see a much more improved Carlos Ullberg, and probably one with hopefully better cardio, where if it goes into those, late second rounds, third round scenarios, that he can, push on through. He kind of faded with the cardio trying to put away Nchukwu back last March. And you can't really do that up against anyone in the UFC. Got to have the cardio right. And here's a guy in Fabio Charon who looks to be in the best shape we've seen him in. Fabio, this is a must win for Fabio as well, since last February he won the LFA light heavyweight championship, unanimous decision victory over Myron Dennis. real good competitive fight, was on a 3-fight win streak before getting picked up to the UFC. Short notice debut against Alonzo Menafield, got Von Flue choked. And then, you play with power against William Knight. That doesn't really work out for anyone. Just how devastating of a striker William Knight is and the power that he brings to the table last August. So, and when your back's up against the wall, that also puts you in a different light, a different urgency, whereas Ullberg isn't in there. I think we're going to see more improved Ullberg, but, don't sleep on Fabio Charon. Like, the big knock on him coming to the UFC was having, weight issues and missing weight. Like, before the Myron Dennis fight, the UG fight at CES, like, he missed weight by 4 pounds, 5 pounds in that vicinity. And before that, at the LFA fight with Eric Murray Jr., like, it was a huge, like an 8 or 9 pound miss. And, when I spoke to him last year, it was just, with COVID, you couldn't really find partners, hard to train or whatever. And that's definitely changed. Like, if you just look at the pictures of him, he's obviously in fantastic shape, made the weight limit, weighted at 206 pounds with the 1 pound allowance. And I just think we're going to see, the Water Buffalo do what he needs to do and just find a way to get on in there. You don't want to mix up with the strike, but find a way to get this fight to the ground. As we're really not sure what Ullberg can do if the fight hits the ground, especially how good we've seen his striking. Not to say that he doesn't have ground skills. We just haven't seen what they're able to do, able to be like. So I expect maybe Fabio Charon to really, throw everything at the table and find a way to maybe grind out a decision, maybe get a late round submission. This is a guy as well. You train with Joe Lozon and those guys. 5 of his 7 wins have come by way of submission. So that's, I think, the path to victory there for Fabio Charon. And as well, this is a do or die fight where he knows he probably can't afford to come up short in this one. So I'm expecting Fabio Charon to maybe pull a bit of an upset there against Carlos Ullberg. Moving on the card, Ronnie Lawrence, Mana Martinez. Once again, this bantamweight division really starting to get cooking. Only one fight for Martinez in the UFC against Guido Canetti last August. But this is a guy that in Martinez has got some big, impressive wins, especially, since coming off a Contender Series back in 2020. And there were quick starchings over Casey Jones and Jose Johnson in Fury FC. And that was a looking for a fight show, which got him to the dance in the UFC. And if you saw what Jose Johnson did last night at Fury FC against Delani Perry, that was like a 10-second, one of the most clean punches that you've seen. And I think Jose Johnson's also a guy that's, getting the call, and you kind of starch him that way in just 32 seconds. Showcases the power that Martinez has. 8 of his 9 wins are KOs, TKOs. This guy that loves to bang and throw down. And he's taking on Ronnie the Heat Lawrence here, 7-1 as a professional mixed martial artist, coming off a 3rd round ground and pound finish last February over Vince Cachero. Also, he fought Jose Young. So that's the similar opponent right there. And he did win that unanimous decision victory, got him in there. They take the chance on him. And you know what? One guy starched Jose Johnson in just 32 seconds. The other one had to go the full 25 minutes. I think overall that's going to be just what the difference is for Ronnie Lawrence. I mean, he may be a native of Nashville. I know he trains with some really good guys down in Florida, especially Landon Quinones was telling me that that's a guy that they've really been he's been working with to get ready for his Titan FC lightweight championship fight. So I expect Lawrence as well to find a way to get through. You just don't want to the way this looks is someone's getting, KO'd, TKO'd. But you know what? If Lawrence is able to get the fight to the ground and avoid and put Martinez on his back, I think that's a big thing in this fight. You don't want to try to mix it up with a guy with that much power. But you know what? It's a good fight for the bantamweight division. And, some guys to try to advance themselves up the next rung in this deep division. But I think Lawrence just has a little bit too much experience. I think he either gets a late submission or a unanimous decision victory over Mana Martinez. AJ Dobson coming in here to the UFC, taking on Jacob Malkoun in the middleweight division. What we saw from AJ Dobson, back on the Contender Series last season. This is a very talented guy, got a rear naked choke in the first round. He loves these first round finishes. His last 3 wins have all come by way of a first round finish. And some of these fights hadn't even seen, a minute into that first round. So Argihan, who was the opponent that AJ Dobson fought on the Contender Series, did push him past at least a minute in the fight. Fight didn't exit the first round, but still a tough, a little bit more of a tough outing. And then obviously Dobson, a well-renowned guy, training with some good guys at, Carlson Gracie's and Immortal Martial Arts Center. Taking on Jacob Malkoon, another native of Australia, did pick up a unanimous decision victory over Abdul Razak Al Hassan last April. But I think we all remember the 18 seconds of his debut where he got flattened by Phil Hawes. And that's something that could very much happen yet again. I think Dobson has power. Dobson has wrestling ability. I think whichever way the cookie crumbles, it's going to fall in the manner of AJ Dobson to find a way to get this victory. Just turned 30 last month, so maybe get himself a little late birthday present with a huge victory here over Jacob Malkoon to move to 7-0, and that's a guy to really look out for on the rise in the middleweight division. If he gets the victory here, I would not be surprised if we see more big feature fights for AJ Dobson. Sergey Morozov comes in here, and he's next up as we look at this card in the bantamweight division against Douglas Silva de Andrade. And look, you know what? Sergey Morozov, he may be a part of that new wave of these Kazakhstan fighters who are just starting to, every year it's like a country has its moment. We saw that with Georgian MMA pretty much last year. And then towards the end of 2020, maybe it's Kazakhstan's time now to really get out on the map, as we saw last weekend with Shavkat Rakhmonov, and then now Sergey Morozov, a very tough guy that's fought in some of the best organizations in the world, especially out in M1. And he's fought guys like Josh Rettinghouse, who's just on this past season of The Ultimate Fighter, Movsar Ivalov, so he's fought some guys that just got him to this really good point. Rafael Diaz as well. A tough Brazilian in his own right. So this is I'm very high on Morozov as well. I think he can love to get the fight to the ground. He's either going to grind out, work for the positions, get a submission, or he's got surprising amount of power, as 8 of his 17 wins have come by way of KO or TKO. And he's 1-1 right now in the UFC. Lone loss is a rear naked choke loss to Umar Nurmagomedov last January. I think he finds a way to correct that here against now Douglas Silva de Andrade. This is a very tough, durable guy, and I keep saying that, but been in the UFC since 2015, just shows how talented he is. We all remember the Henry Briones spinning back fist victory that he had. He's been in there with now a champion in Petr Yan. He's fought Henan Barao, had a win over Henan Barao. I know that may not mean much, but still, that was the guy that at one point was very solid. Win over Marlon Vera as well back in 2018. And the losses, really, when you look at them, to Lerone Murphy, Petr Yan, and Rob Font. Yan, now an interim champion. Font, a guy that's just on the cusp of fighting for a bantamweight championship, and just perfect finish in his last fight out against Perello last October. So I think this is going to be a real interesting fight. I think this one could also be one of those sleeper fight of the night type fights. So I don't know. I'm leaning Morozov, but I think this one goes the distance, and I think we see a way where Silva de Andrade could win, but I'm leaning Morozov as well. I think right now it's just time for all of Kazakhstan. Then we have I guess a very exciting debut is this man named Blood Diamond, or street name is Mike Mathiatha, but Blood Diamond is what he's known as. Been a longtime training partner with Israel Adesanya. They've been around the world. Israel Adesanya gave him the stamp of approval, so we have to go and say with what he can do. He's supposed to take on Orion Kosi on this card, but Kosi obviously pulled out. So Jeremiah Wells comes here on a little bit of short notice. And look, Wells is a gamer. We saw what he did in his last fight in his UFC debut against Warley Alves. Beautiful right hook to ground and pound finish with just 30 seconds into the second round. And Warley Alves, that's a tough, very tough guy in the UFC in their welterweight division. And, was supposed to fight Jake Matthews, but Wells had a guy in his corner test positive for COVID, and then was supposed to fight Tim Means, but Means pulled out. So now that was supposed to be last weekend. So you know what, it does work out here for Jeremiah Wells, the Renzo Gracie Philly native, and a guy that had a very successful run, out on the East Coast with whether it was in CES or CFFC. He was one of their welterweight champions before going to the big show here at the UFC. You obviously don't, when you're fighting a guy with that city kickboxing background, as we said before in the Ullberg fight, you don't want to try to make it into a firefight or anything like that. But I think Wells, the thing that he does have is a lot of power, and I think power does counter some of those strikes. And if he just plays his cards right, doesn't rush into anything, I think Wells could have a good night. But it's supposed to be the big night for the debut here of Blood Diamond. So without really seeing much on what Blood Diamond's been able to do, I think we're hoping it's going to be a great debut, but I'm going to lean Wells here. I think Wells has enough wealth of experience against someone like a guy making his debut. And as well, this Blood Diamond guy hasn't fought in about a year. His last fight was February 2020. That's a long time, about 2 years away. Whereas Jeremiah Wells, he's been active, a little bit more at least active than what Blood Diamond has done. So I think all the diamonds and more diamonds on the necklaces of Jeremiah Wells may be coming out. I'd expect him, honestly. I think he spoils the party against Blood Diamond. And now the fight that was supposed to be higher up on the card, but it's now the opening bout, is now a heavyweight bout as William Knight takes on Maxine Grisham. Grisham, he weighed in 206. His opponent, William Knight, though, missed by a lot, was very heavy at the weigh-ins, weighed in at 218. So they advance it up a weight class, I guess. And I know Knight has to forfeit 40% of his purse, but that's, whether you're taking the fight if you're taking the fight on short notice, you should know where your weight is, I guess, and, do a little bit better than what had happened. And I know your body shuts down, but that's why maybe you should just be a heavyweight. I don't know, but that's just inexcusable. But the power is there that Knight has. Knight's one of the more devastating guys at light heavyweight, as we've seen in his time in the UFC and what he's been able to do. The wins over Alonzo Menafield, Fabio Charon. Lone loss was to Daun Zhang back in April of 2021, which was his second fight in the UFC after getting the contract on the 2020 season of the Contenders Series. And I just wonder, carrying that extra weight, I think maybe Grisham could try to push the fight later rounds, get him tired, and find a way to just get that submission, finish him off on the feet. And, Grisham's a guy that's been a well-traveled fighter, spending time in the PFL for 2 seasons in 2018, 2019. As well as what he's done in the UFC, 1-1 in the UFC. Last fight was the loss to Dustin Jacoby, that's a rejuvenated fighter in his own right. Was originally supposed to fight Ed Herman, now gets William Knight up a weight class. I think, I think as well, Grisham being lighter, I think that does end up boding well for him. I think he's just got a little bit too much experience. I think he tires out William Knight, gets the fight to the ground. Submission in the second round at some point. Or if anything, he just, rides his time, lands some damage, gets a TKO that way, or a decision. Honestly, I think Grisham, I think he's going to make William Knight pay for missing the weight that much, to that much of an extent as well. And then as we continue on, that's the card. I think it should be a real fun pay-per-view. So hopefully, everyone enjoys their night of UFC fights, as we're on that big train now with tons of events going until March 26th, that Columbus show, where there's a break that first week in April. So And you know what? The only thing that about this card that these Super Bowl weekend cards used to feel so special. Like, remember Anderson Silva, Vitor Belfort. That fight was electric. Nick Diaz, Carlos Condit for the interim welterweight title. I remember being more excited for that than the Patriots-Giants Super Bowl 46 game, which is, another really good game the following night. But unfortunately, it's not like that. They're not in Vegas. This is in Houston, which has been a great town for the UFC, especially coming out of the pandemic. But you know what? Let's transition over to the Super Bowl. At least it is a card, though, that is worthy, to kind of go up with the Super Bowl. And it's going to be, if I know we're not really talking football on this channel a lot, but, it's a big football game. I think it's an interesting Super Bowl. Once again, the Rams, the second team to host a Super Bowl in their own stadium, or it took up until Super Bowl 55 for that to be a thing. So 55 years, no one had hosted a Super Bowl, and now back-to-back years we have that. And last year, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, that worked out very well for them, a dominant victory over the Kansas City Chiefs. The Rams, I think this is a team that they got to win now, and they know they got to win now. That's why they made those moves. They upgraded the quarterback position. They bring in Matthew Stafford, and Stafford started the year off really strong, had that kind of slump towards the end, but this Rams team, I think overall they've just got a lot. They got way too many weapons. They make the move to bring Odell Beckham in, where, look, that was panned at the time, especially as he really wasn't that productive in Cleveland, and he looked like a bit of a head case and what have you, but he's been a very serviceable, dangerous threat receiver for the Rams. And I think as well, you pair him up with what Cooper Kupp's been able to do. Cooper Kupp right now may be the best receiver in all of the National Football League. I think that poses problems for the Bengals secondary. If the Rams can as well get the ball running, I think that'd be very a benefactor as well. But I think, for Stafford, he's got to have that success where he can't make those mistakes that have kind of followed him around. But they got to get the ball to, if they can't get the ball to Beckham or Cooper Kupp, Van Jefferson's been a very serviceable receiver. Obviously, they miss Robert Woods a lot. That would have been Robert Woods' really role, but he's, season-ending injury affects him, and he's out. Unfortunate. But Van Jefferson had stepped up at moments, and I think this is the Super Bowl. Weird guys have always stepped up in these games. Like, the Redskins, or now the Commanders, they had, Timmy Smith break out in the backfield for that Super Bowl win over the Denver Broncos back in the 80s. And of course, if it wasn't for the wild finish at Super Bowl 49, Chris Matthews, a, CFL receiver for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, could have potentially been a Super Bowl MVP with like a huge game. And I think he had 2 touchdowns in that game. So you just never know who steps up. So look out for maybe Van Jefferson. But on the other side of the ball, this is where I think this poses some problems to the Bengals, is the defense that the Rams have. Like, I'm impressed with the Rams' ability to rush the passer. If Aaron Donald, one of the best pass rushers, they upgrade as well in that area by bringing in Von Miller from Denver. And the last time we saw Von Miller in a Super Bowl against a young quarterback in like a Cam Newton, Von Miller ran wild. Von Miller was the one that single-handedly won that Super Bowl for the Denver Broncos. And I could see him having a big game, especially with the Bengals having some issues protecting the quarterback. Look, in that divisional round, Tennessee could not protect Joe Burrow at all. Got sacked 9 times. And it's not like the Tennessee pass rush is that, impressive or sexy or anything like that. This is a much better pass rush with, much more elite, high-level players that are on the Rams' defensive side of the ball. And as well, you got to worry about the matchup between Jalen Ramsey and Jamar Chase. Jalen Ramsey, he's going to thrive in this scenario as well. And he's one of the reasons why the Rams brought him over a few years ago. And as I said, the Rams know that they need to win because they don't really have draft picks. So they went all in for this year. So they are literally this close to making that come true. And it'd be great to see for Matt Stafford if the Rams do win the Super Bowl. That guy was in, purgatory in Detroit. They just couldn't, the Lions themselves couldn't get out of their own ways, or, injuries, what have you, just bad luck, just, being a Detroit Lion, unfortunately. So, and I know all the state of Michigan are rooting for him. Stafford really did everything in his power to try to make things right there. They just couldn't get the breaks with the Lions, and now he's getting them here with the Los Angeles Rams. But let's look at Cincinnati. This is a team that's turned it around. They got a very explosive offense. Joe Burrow is proving to be every bit worth a first-round draft pick that the Bengals had a couple years ago. At the draft, I thought they should have got another offensive lineman to protect him because, got to remember, Joe Burrow is still coming off an ACL injury last year. But they went out and drafted Joe Burrow's teammate at LSU in Jamar Chase, and that has been one of the best receiving threats, cores, whatever you want to call it, a dynamic duo that they are, and they're just tough to stop, and they make plays, and they do big things as well. The tight end game in Uzama has been huge, though he is hurt and will do everything in his power to play. I just don't know how successful he will be. I think Joe Mixon's going to have a big game out of the backfield, whether it's rushing or receiving in this game. I think this game could be a runaway from the Rams, but I still can't bet against the Bengals in the sense of they'll probably be down at halftime. I think that's just kind of the trend of the Bengals, but the Bengals just can't let it get too far away. The Bengals are a definite second-half team. Heck, they even admitted we are a second-half team. We turn it on when the third quarter kicks off. And I think if you're the Rams, you got to be wary of that. You want to make sure you keep doing what you do offensively, force some turnovers. The Bengals haven't really been bitten by that too much. But if you get that pass rush, I think that's going to be a big thing for the Los Angeles Rams. So I think the Rams win this game. I'm rooting for Cincinnati. I think it'd be a great story for the Bengals to win this, especially after Cincinnati hadn't won a playoff game since 1990. The last championship that city had seen is the Reds back in 1990 with those nasty boys Reds. But I think the key to the game is the Bengals, if they get down, they can't get down too big. And for the Rams to find a way to slow the momentum. And when Joe Burrow turns it on, he's a problem. But I think the offensive liabilities on the line for the Bengals may be too much of a problem. And I think Stafford has a big day. And I think the Rams defense, they score a couple, pick sixes, scoop and scores, whatever it may be. But I like the Rams to win this game. I don't know. I think it'll be a good game. And I think that's the thing that excites me the most. It's, the Rams themselves, a franchise that were just in the Super Bowl, they've upgraded at the quarterback. They know they can't score more than they got to do better than scoring 3 points. And, they're playing a really good up and coming quarterback here in Joe Burrow, but I don't think it's the Bengals' time. I think the Bengals, they may get back to this game in another couple of years, but I think this is the Rams' time. They've just made the investments. They've got some players that have been to the Super Bowl before that have been used to that kind of extra big game experience. But I don't know. I don't have a score line, but I think the Rams do win this game. I think their defense is just going to be too much. Look, the Bengals offense, it sells tickets. The Rams offense, that sells tickets, but offense sells tickets. Defense wins championships. So that's the way I see it. Anyways, thanks for hanging out. It was fun. A little bit of a little under an hour here, but enjoy the fights tonight. I'll probably be back tomorrow to break down and recap everything that's happening and some, final Super Bowl thoughts as well. So with that, I'm Jason Hagen. If you like this, please like, rate, and subscribe. Helps the channel out. Trying to grow this thing. Trying to, do it for you, the viewer at home. So if you like what you see, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, leave a comment what you think the Super Bowl is going to be like or what your predictions are for the fights ahead, which are literally about an hour away from going on. So with that, I'm Jason Hagholm. Peace out, and we'll see you all tomorrow.